do this, right? But I'm going to do the sentence because there's a handout on CAMS called Translation Procedure. All right? And it walks you through step by step how to deal with Greek sentences. And I broke that handout into sections, and that's what's in English. And I'm going to show you how you go through this in Greek. Okay? So just kind of watch, because you have all of these notes on CAMS. So don't stress out. All of these notes are on CAMS. Every one of them. Right up here. Okay? So, when I'm looking at a sentence, the first thing that I do is simplify the passage using punctuation. I go through and find my punctuation marks, and I make a mark. Okay? So my first one is this period here, and then I've got a comma here. Do I have anything else? No. So then the next thing that I want to do is find any dependent clauses. Well, since we haven't done that, that's chapter 9, there aren't any. Okay, so then the next thing I'm looking for is prepositional phrases. And so what you want to do is go through and find the prepositions, and you know those because you've learned them as vocab. So N is the preposition, so I circle it and then I underline what follows it, because I know N goes with the dative. So everything that's in the dative following that N, I underline, because that's one phrase. Then here's another N, and then everything in the dative that follows it is another phrase. Then here's another N, everything that follows it that's in the dative is a phrase. Are there any other prepositions? No. Okay? And then the next thing that I do, does that make sense? Okay, the next thing that I do is hunt for a verb. Right, so I've circled my prepositional phrases here, and then I hunt for the verbs. And these verbs all happen to be the same. Can I underline that? No? Okay. My little marky guy won't let me underline the first verb on the bottom line. But those are all of my verbs. Then I hunt for subjects and predicate nominatives. Now, what case is subjects and predicate nominatives going to be in? Nominative. Predicate. Nominative. And then subject is the nominative. So here's theos. Theos. Agape. Agape. Okay, so everything is agape and theos. So what are we dealing with if everything is all nominatives and then I've just got a bunch of prepositional phrases, right? So there's nothing here that's in the accusative, right? Mm-hmm. So there's no objects of any kind, direct or indirect. There's no dative, there's no accusative cases in this sentence, right? Yeah? Okay, then the next thing that I look for is possessives. What case are the possessives in? Are there any in this sentence? No? Now, what we said, we're looking for indirect objects, but there's something in the dative. Why is that not an indirect object? Ooh, because it's following a preposition, and that means that it's not functioning as an indirect object. It cannot be both. Okay? So when you see a dative, make sure that there's not a preposition in front of it. Okay? Now, the last thing that I do is go a little clause by clause. Okay? When I made my marks, yikes, when I made my little marks.
Tim,
yep.
It cannot be both what?
Any word cannot have more than one function. Period. So it cannot show possession while functioning as the object of the preposition. It can't be an indirect object and the object of the preposition. So in this context, when you see dative, te agape, you think dative, right? So dative has what two options as functions, Frank? The dative case.
Indirect object.
Yeah, and what's the one that we just learned in chapter 8? There's another one.
Indirect object?
Indirect object is the first one. There's another function that a dative can have now.
Oh, serve as the thing that object of the preposition.
Object of the preposition. Right. So what I'm saying is, whenever you see that, you have to pick one. Okay? So it can't be both of those functions. And Frank, it's real easy to pick one. If it follows a preposition, it's the object of that preposition. If it doesn't, it's an indirect object. Does that make sense? Okay. So, when I'm dealing with this guy, I go clause by clause. Okay? So I know that the article, right, this was in the example, this first phrase. So the article here tells me that theos is the subject, not agape, even though they're both nominative. So the first phrase, the first clause is God is love. Okay? Then I've got a punctuation mark. So I've got a new thought. And then I think that he gives you this, right? Does he give you this? How does he give it to you?
One remaining.
The one remaining? Okay. Just wondering how he was going to deal with that participle. The one remaining, okay? Participles are in the spring. You're going to love participles. Okay? So one remaining, and then we have this prepositional phrase. In love. Right? You don't have to give me the article when it's a prepositional phrase. The one remaining, in love. Okay? And then we have, in God, he remains. In English, we would say the one remaining in love, comma, remains in God, because we're subject, verb, complement. Here, the emphasis, Greek does emphasis word order, is on remaining in God. It happens before its verb. Okay? So that's how that happens. Now, can it be a couple other things grammatically? Not really, but it's hard when you've got both of them back to back, figuring out which one goes with which verb. Right? So that's a little confusing, granted. But this is the one remaining in God, and then you have to deal with this verb. If you didn't know where to put this prepositional phrase, and you thought it might go over here somewhere, this verb would not have anything with it, and it needs something to modify it, right? That would just be he, she, it remains. To what? Okay? So, God is love, and the one remaining in love verb remains in God. Then we have another punctuation mark, which you would have marked as a different phrase. And God, and here's that same preposition following the verb, remains in him. Okay? From a procedural standpoint, not so much from a grammar standpoint, does that make sense on how to break down a sentence? Okay? Then what we do at this point is sit and wrestle with the idea that we remain in God's love. Right? 1 John 4 is all about our identity.